Good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. Nations reach historic agreement to protect the planet for nature by 2030. Warship capsizes in Thailand, leaving 31 sailors missing. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa re-elected as governing ANC leader. My name is Tunde Ido. Nations have agreed to protect a third of the planet for nature by 2030 in an historic deal aimed at safeguarding biodiversity. The agreement at the COP15 UN Biodiversity Summit in Montreal, Canada, came early today. There will also be targets for protecting vital ecosystems such as rainforests and wetlands and the rights of indigenous peoples. The summit had been moved from China and postponed due to COVID. China, which was still in charge of the meeting, approved the deal despite a last-minute objection from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The summit in Montreal had been regarded as a last chance to put nature on a path to recovery. Throughout the talks, there was division over the strength of ambition and how to finance the plans. A British High Court has ruled that the country's controversial arrangement to send asylum seekers to Rwanda is legal. The court ruled that the scheme did not breach the UN's Refugee Convention or human rights laws, but judges added that the cases of 8 asylum seekers had not been properly considered and will need to be reconsidered. Home Secretary Sula Braverman said she is committed to making the Rwanda policy work. A hearing will take place in January to deal with any appeal application. Former Home Secretary Priti Patel announced the government's plan to deport some people to Rwanda back in April. The forced deportation flight, which was due to take off on the 14th of June, was grounded following a series of objections from lawyers for several asylum seekers, along with the Public and Commercial Services Union and 2 charities. In a reaction, charities involved in the legal case expressed their disappointment after the High Court's ruling.
We are very disappointed by the outcome today. Obviously, we now need to regroup and consider our next steps. It's a huge relief that 8 individual clients who had removal directions to Rwanda have had those decisions quashed, and those will be returned for the Home Office to reconsider. But obviously, our concern is with all the hundreds and indeed thousands of people threatened with removal to Rwanda at this point.
We share James's disappointment, but we are delighted at the decision in the case of the 8 individual refugees who no longer face the torment at this point in time of being deported to Rwanda. However, that threat has not gone away at this stage, and it may well be that we need to seriously consider the possibility of an appeal to prevent that happening. We were clear right from the outset that our members didn't want to carry out this policy on the basis they thought it was unlawful, morally reprehensible and utterly inhumane.
In the meantime, about 150 years after the end of slavery in its former colonies, the Netherlands has officially apologized for the injustice. Prime Minister Mark Rutte gave the apology at the National Archives in The Hague earlier today. The cabinet representatives are also scheduled to speak in the former Dutch colony of Suriname in South America, as well as on the 6 Caribbean islands that still belong to the Dutch kingdom. The Netherlands was once the 3rd largest colonial power in the world and enslaved an estimated 500,000 people for over 200 years. They were mostly abducted from West Africa, sold and forced to work on the plantations in Suriname and the Antilles. The Dutch kingdom was one of the last countries in Europe to officially abolish slavery on the 1st of July 1863, but the actual end came only in 1873. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida says the country will support the African Union's entry to the Group of 20 Forum of the world's largest economies. The Prime Minister disclosed this to reporters after meeting Senegalese President Macky Sall in Tokyo. Mr. Kishida said the Union's addition to the G20 was important, given African countries' increasing role in international society. He said Japan also agreed with Senegal on resource development cooperation and boosting investment by Japanese firms. Elsewhere, Moscow today announced that several of its warships were participating in naval exercises starting this week with Beijing's Navy as Russia and China deepen ties amidst pressure from the West. The Russian Defense Ministry said the drills will take place between December 24th and 27th in the East China Sea with the aim of strengthening naval cooperation between Moscow and Beijing. The statement said they will include live firing of missiles, artillery, and exercises to counter submarines. It said China will incorporate 2 destroyer, patrol ships, a supply ship, and a submarine. China and Russia have drawn closer in recent years as part of what they call a no-limit relationship, acting as a counterweight to the global dominance of the United States. Thailand's Navy says 31 sailors are missing after a warship carrying over 100 crew capsized and sank during a storm in the Gulf of Thailand. The warship sank after waters flooded its power control last night. Authorities today said they had rescued 75 crew, but 31 were still missing in rough seas. The Navy said search crews worked through the night to find survivors, and the operation was continuing. They also announced an investigation into the cause of the disaster. In Canada, 5 people were killed and another was wounded in a shooting in the suburb of the city of Toronto. Local police chief Jean McSween told journalists that the suspect also died after an exchange of fire with law enforcement, saying the shooting took place in an apartment building. The victims were found in different apartments in the building, which is located in Vaughan in the suburb about 30 kilometers north of Toronto. Police were investigating the motive and whether there was a connection between the victims and the male suspect, who has not been named. The suspect allegedly acted alone.
What I can tell you at this point is there are 5 deceased victims, 1 deceased subject, and 1 victim who was initially shot and transported to a local hospital. And our officers are continuing the investigation here. We have our emergency response unit on scene, as well as our forensic identification officers. The emergency response unit is actually clearing the building. So what we're trying to do is make sure the residents that live behind us here in this building are able to get back as soon as possible. That will take some time. It takes a significant amount of time to clear these buildings. As you can see, it's a large building, but we'll do our very best to get that cleared up. There's no further threat to the community at this point.
In the meantime, 3 Jordanian police personnel have been killed in a raid on the hideout of the suspected killers of a policeman in the southern city of Man. The police said one of the suspects, believed to be a fighter, was killed today. A senior police officer had been killed in clashes with demonstrators in Man on Friday during protests over high fuel prices that have spread to several cities across Jordan. You're watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. We'll be right back after this break. Please stay.
Affected. Sound. Found. What do we see? What do we say? Flowing from a spring. A fact A to Z. Check and confirm. Ever expounding current events. Traveling down from the business gist to the globally arising happenings, to the sports news, to the bittersweet infos. Guided transmission. Even diffusion, vast and past, detailed facts are fled. Within seconds, nuggets of words that flew across borders are fired. Stories short and long, wrapped in bundles of words, broken and dissected as it is, except misheard. This is the news as it is.
How would you like a TV station that breaks the barriers of your TV screen? A TV station that brings infotainment to your forefront, breaking the conceptual fourth wall. Giving you television that is personal to you and your everyday life. Indigenous broadcasting for every man, cutting across the shackles of age, class, and language. With the best of equipment in digitized broadcasting. At Western Spring Television, your television experience has never been this magical.
We'll bring you the best in news and programs, breaking news to you as it drops from where it drops.
Talk shows that keep you glued to your seats, sports programs not void of in-depth analysis, entertainment programs cutting across all ages, political analysis with all its accompanying controversies, social responsibility because we care. Western Nigeria gave us our first feel of television. Western Spring Television is taking us to the next level.
You're still watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has been re-elected as the governing ANC leader to wild cheers from his supporters. He defeated his rival Zweli Mkhize by 2,476 votes to 1,897. Mr. Ramaphosa won despite being dogged by allegations of money laundering and a last-minute surge in support for Mr. Mkhize, who has also been accused of corruption, though both denying the allegations. His victory puts him in pole position to lead the ANC in the 2024 election, but he is still at risk as he is being investigated by police, the tax office, and central bank over allegations that he stashed at least $580,000 in a sofa at his private farm and then covered up its theft. A panel of legal experts appointed by the Speaker of Parliament said he had a case to answer, as he may have both violated the Constitution and broken an anti-corruption law. And in Europe, Sweden's Supreme Court has blocked the extradition of an exiled Turkish journalist, a key demand by Ankara to ratify Stockholm's NATO membership. The court said there were several hindrances to sending back former editor-in-chief of the Zaman Daily, Bülent Kenes, whom Turkey accuses of being involved in a 2016 attempt to overthrow President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The court added that some of the accusations against Mr. Kenes are not crimes in Sweden, which, along with the political nature of the case and his refugee status in the country, rendered extradition impossible. Mr. Kenes, who now works for the Stockholm Center for Freedom, an association founded by other Turkish dissidents in exile, told the AFP news agency that he was happy by the decision and stressed that the allegations against him were fabricated by the Erdogan regime. The exiled journalist is the only person Mr. Erdogan has identified by name amongst dozens of people Ankara wants extradited in exchange for approving Sweden's membership bid. Ukraine capital Kiev was rocked by explosions as Russia launched a rare overnight attack on the city. Kiev officials said no one was killed and most of the missiles were shot down, but some did hit critical infrastructure, causing a blackout across the region. Pictures online show firefighters at a large blaze at a power plant. This latest barrage of missile attacks from Russia is the third in 5 days, but nighttime raids on Kiev are unusual. The head of Kiev's military administration said 23 Iranian missiles were launched of which 18 were shut down. Authorities reported that only 2 people were injured, a very low number considering many people will have been asleep at the time of the strikes on civilian areas. Kiev's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, wrote on Telegram that critical infrastructure facilities were damaged and engineers were working to restore power. In the meantime, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has urged fellow leaders at a Baltic summit to ignore any call by Moscow for a ceasefire until it withdraws from conquered territory in Ukraine. The Prime Minister addressed fellow leaders of joint expeditionary force nations in Latvia, where Ukraine's president urged the West for more weapons. Mr. Sunak said the alliance must deliver more military aid to Ukraine, including additional air defense system, artillery, and armored vehicles. Mr. Sunak's remarks came after the UK announced the fresh supply of hundreds of thousands of rounds of artillery ammunition as part of its package of defensive aid for 2023 under a £250 million contract.
Meeting here today with our Northern European partners and allies is so important. It was great to hear from President Zelensky about their needs, and the UK has played a leading role in providing Ukraine with the military support that they require to repel Russian aggression and indeed push back and regain the territory which is rightfully theirs. That was a topic of our conversations here today. I'm pleased to say that there's widespread support amongst our Northern European allies.
Still in Europe, British Health Secretary Steve Barclay says he is still keen to talk to unions representing health workers, stating that it is not just about pay. Nurses are set to go on strike again tomorrow, and ambulance workers are set to walk out on Wednesday. Mr. Barclay has raised concerns about patient safety not being guaranteed during the latter's action. The Royal College of Nursing said they will call off the strike if Mr. Barclay agreed to stop discussions on pay, but the government is refusing to change its offer from what was recommended by the independent pay review body. Most unions want above-inflation pay rises, something the government says will further fuel price increases.
We regret the disruption to patients. We've accepted in full the independent pay review body recommendations, and I think it's important now that the trade unions do likewise. So any disruption to patients in terms of operations being cancelled is deeply regrettable, and that's why it's important we get back to talks. We look at the range of issues that are impacting on nursing, the consequences of the pandemic, and how we work together in the interests of patients, and that's what we prioritised in the autumn statement with the extra £6.6 billion of funding, and I urge Pat Cullen and the RCN to do likewise, to come to those talks and focus on how we work together in the interests of patients.
In other news, the Ghanaian government says it has suspended all debt service payment under certain categories of its external debt. The country's Ministry of Finance announced this in a statement. It said the suspension will include Eurobonds, commercial term loans, and most of its bilateral debt, pending future agreements with all relevant creditors. The government explained that the measures were necessary to prevent a further deterioration in the economic, financial, and social situation in the West African nation. Ghana had on December 5 launched a domestic debt exchange program to restore public debt sustainability. Last Tuesday, the IMF said it had reached a staff-level agreement with Ghana on a $3 billion bailout package to tackle its economic difficulties. One of the grounds on which Ghana got the facility from the IMF is a comprehensive debt restructuring. Twitter users have voted in favor of Elon Musk stepping down as the platform's chief executive after the billionaire ran a poll on his future. A total of 57.5% voted yes after Mr. Musk asked his 122 million followers whether he should stand down. Mr. Musk, who bought Twitter for $44 billion, said before the poll closed that he would abide by the result. The technology tycoon, who also runs Tesla and SpaceX, has faced much criticism since taking over the site. Mr. Musk is yet to comment since the poll closed, but even if he were to resign as chief executive, he will remain as Twitter owner. Some sports stories. Nigeria and Benin have submitted a joint bid to stage the Africa Cup of Nations in 2025, joining Algeria, Morocco, and Zimbabwe and Zambia in having expressed an interest in hosting the finals. Three-time African champions Nigeria are looking to stage for the third time, having co-hosted with Ghana in 2000 after being the sole organizer in 1980. Nigeria last staged a major tournament in 2009 when the Under-17 World Cup took place in the West African nation. Designated host Guinea was stripped of rights earlier this year because of concerns over infrastructure and facility. The successful candidate to host the 2014 finals is set to be announced in February. Lionel Messi says he will not retire from international football after captaining Argentina to a first World Cup trophy in 36 years. The Paris Saint-Germain forward was asked about his future by Argentine TV station TY Sport after the South American beat France 4-2 on penalties following a 3-3 draw. Messi turns 36 next year but believes he has plenty to offer his country. Messi, who was playing in his fifth World Cup, scored twice in the final and also converted a penalty in the shootout. He won the tournament's Golden Ball, awarded to the best player after scoring 7 goals. Messi will turn 39 during the next World Cup, and he had hinted previously that his edition in Qatar will be his last. However, coach Lionel Scaloni says he wants Messi in his squad for the 2026 tournament, which will take place in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Organizers of the Cannes Film Festival today demanded the immediate release of Iranian actor Tarini Alidosti, who was arrested over the weekend by local authorities on charges of spreading falsehood about the ongoing nationwide protest. In a statement shared on its official Twitter page, the prestigious film gala extended full support to the 38-year-old actor as it condemned her arrest by the Iranian government. Al-Dosti, star of Ashghar Fari's Oscar-winning movie The Salesman, was taken into custody on Saturday, a week after she made a post on Instagram expressing solidarity with the first man recently executed for crimes allegedly committed during the protest. In May, the actor attended the 75th edition of the prestigious European Film Extravaganza to present her film, Laila Brothers. Directed by Saeed Roustai, the Iranian drama was selected to compete for the festival's top honor, Palme d'Or. Before we end Spring Global, here is a recap of our top stories. Nations have agreed to protect a third of the planet for nature by 2030 in an historic deal aimed at safeguarding biodiversity. Thailand's Navy says 31 sailors are missing after a warship carrying over 100 crew capsized and sank during a storm in the Gulf of Thailand. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has been re-elected as the governing ANC leader to wild cheers from his supporters. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. I am Tunde Ido. Good evening and thank you for watching.